Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Application Packaging Experts Roundtable. As usual, everyone will be muted. You can ask questions in the chat. We encourage you to do so. And if you come up with a question later or don't get your answer, please leverage our community. And a video will be provided following the event. My name is Bob Kelly. I am the Director of Product Management for our Admin Studio and Software Vulnerability Management products. Kieran?
Hello, thanks for joining us today. I'm Kieran, Product Manager for Admin Studio, and I'm on Bob's team. Mike?
Yep, Mike O'Connor, it says Senior Solutions Engineer. I'm covering Admin Studio for well over a decade, and glad to be here today. Sunny?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny. I'm one of the account managers for Admin Studio, so very excited to be here today.
Great. Thank you. So we always pick a topic. And this time we came up with managed applications. What's a managed application? What is the implication of managed versus unmanaged? And maybe how to get your hands around it. So this turned out to be a build slide that isn't even building in order. So I'll just load it up. Okay. So a managed application is one that your team decided to deploy in your environment, not one that showed up mysteriously. It's very common still today for people to have admin access of their systems or even the ability to install applications into their own profile, not to all users, but in effect an ability to put software on their computer that isn't necessarily planned for and managed by the team. So a managed application is one that you'd be aware of, that you approved. There was a request for it at some point, and it was either licensed or analyzed. You may have a subject matter expert for the product. A lot of organizations we talk to do this today, where that person would be responsible for seeing if there's any updates, significant updates, security updates to the application, and alerting support that there's a need to get a new version out the door, and how to test the application, right? So, you get a request for an application, you package it, you deploy it. Who says it works, right? You necessarily would like somebody that understands the application and how it works to verify that it is functioning properly. Anything that you would add to that?
Another really strong point about a managed application is you have complete control over its customization. Right now, since you as an IT team are deploying the application to your machine or a single machine based on what is the kind of the request, you know what are the kind of customizations you want to apply on the application. It could be, the customizations could be some standard customizations that you follow across your organization, or it could be specific to certain machines, or it could be specific to a certain set of users or a department. So basically with managed application, you have the complete control over what are the kind of customizations you want to apply, which otherwise wouldn't have been possible if it was not installed by you or your team. So those customizations would generally, having those customizations set correctly would generally make sure there is no undesired behavior or a downtime when a user is trying to use that application. So those customizations are really important to go in the right way.
To try to mitigate the support questions that might otherwise come, right? If you can get it out there with the defaults applicable to your organization, any configuration, you can make it much easier for that customer to get going with it. Another thing we see a lot of environments do is they're very particular and managing the shortcuts and where they exist and how they're named and how they're grouped, which has become a bit of a problem for MSIX to a degree because shortcuts work a little differently there.
Differently, yeah.
You want to touch on that real
you made
quick?
A good point about
the MSIX angle?
Sure. Just one point. You made a very good point about the user profile and the machine profile. It's very important that when you deploy an application, you really understand in which context you want to install. And you as an IT administrator have a very good understanding of how the package is built. Maybe there are certain components which go into machine context. There are certain components going to user context. Ideally, you want everything to go into user context. That is the best package, and those are the best practices. But as an IT admin, you will have a good understanding of that package, and that gives you a better control when you are deploying. How do you want to manage those components and all of that? So a user profile sometimes really plays a very important role as to how the application behaves when it's installed on the endpoint. You might see the application when you try to launch it might not launch at all, right, if it is not installed correctly. Coming to the shortcut point, MSIX, of course, it treats shortcuts a little differently. They don't use the word shortcuts for MSIX packages. They call it as applications. And the other word that you generally hear a lot when you talk about shortcuts in MSIX is entry points. So they refer to these as shortcuts or entry points to launch your application. Now, it's strange that MSIX doesn't allow you to create shortcuts on the desktops. You will have to create only in the start menu, and not create, but that is the default behavior. It gives you option to just create the shortcuts in the start menu. But of course, it gives you some additional configurations where you could decide, hey, I want this application to appear with a white tile or a bigger tile, just like the tiles concept on the Windows 10 machines, right? So I think it gives you all those additional configurations, but still, you would not see that going on the desktop.
Yeah, which can be another change to contend with when it comes to MSIX. There's always
right.
something. Yeah.
One other point that I see with few applications, maybe not all, but some of the applications have a pre-configured thing that when you launch a shortcut, generally some parameter is passed to the executable which that shortcut triggers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I guess VLC has it. When you launch the VLC, you could maybe launch it with maybe a skin or something, right? So now MSIX also doesn't have that capability today. So when you launch a shortcut which behind the scene invokes an executable, right? Now you don't have an option of passing the arguments directly, but thanks to package support framework, there is a way you could still achieve it, but again, it's not default behavior of MSIX. So you could use the package support framework and a fix up where you could pass the arguments to the executable. So it's possible, but not straightforward.
Yeah. Yep. Just another consideration. There'll always be more the more we dig into it and learn more.
Yeah. For somebody who is in the middle of the transition or in the middle of the migration between their legacy, MSI EXEs towards MSIX packages, I think these are certain points that they have to really look into to really identify, hey, is this a good package for me for conversion, or just I convert and it starts working. Those could be one set of category of packages. The second set of category could be, oh, these are good packages, but need some additional work, maybe some changes in the configuration, or let's say use of a fix-up or something like that. And the third category could be, these cannot be converted at all. So there'll be always some applications in all the three categories. So I think it depends a lot on how you look at those packages and come to this conclusion as to which package fits into which category.
And then of course the most critical thing these days when we think about a managed application is the security posture, right? Are you monitoring that application for releases, for vulnerability disclosures? There's a bunch of ways to go about that. Of course, if your users can install whatever they want, then you have to be a little more dynamic about it. But a managed application, you should have somebody assigned, a process in place, a watch somewhere know when an update is necessary or available. Then
Yeah,
on the flip side,
that's a great point. Just imagine you have installed an application and your auto update is set to on. Your user has installed it. The IT team has no knowledge about that application, and it has got auto updates set to on. Now there is an update released by the vendor, and let's say it has got some vulnerabilities, right? So that will come as a surprise to you. If it was your managed application, you would have had better control. You first take the new version from the vendor, you test it, you make sure that everything is all good, there are no vulnerabilities or even the functional breaking or anything of that testing that you want to do. And once you're 100% sure, hey, it's all good, that is when you deploy. So these are the kind of things that you really can easily avoid when you bring all your applications under your under your management, or make it a managed application.
Yeah. And of course, if it's not managed, then you're not watching it. You didn't improve it. Maybe it's unlicensed, or the license isn't being properly managed. There's just a long list of problems that come with that are too obvious to dig into in depth. So
I think it's important to understand here, sometimes the end users will not really understand the license implications. They may find a setup somewhere online. They don't know if it is a legitimate source. They just go and maybe I have admin rights on my machine and I just install it. I don't know there is a license involved. There is a licensing angle, and not having the right license would mean a big damage to your organization. So those things sometimes really become serious.
So the first thing you're going to want to do, if you were completely blind to this problem of managed versus unmanaged, which I'm sure you're not, is to assess this, right? So, take a look at the inventory of your environment, and do you have a package for all the applications? That's probably the number one indicator that it's under management from the perspective of the people on this call. And therefore, you are keeping up with it. There's a new update, you package it, you make sure it updates the old one appropriately, works as expected, and you get it out, in the priorities that you establish. But then there's also the question of, should it be removed? And I think we'll get into that one in a second, because we're going to have Mike show us a feature we put in Admin Studio. We don't tend to talk too much product here, but I think this is a good exercise and still kind of applicable to anybody. This idea of taking an inventory and matching up against your packages. Are you able to share your screen, Mike?
Sure. Try that out. Is that coming through?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
All right, cool. To Bob's point, what we could do is an example of maybe getting a little bit more control over applications and getting more of them in a managed state. So I have Admin Studio. I'm in what's called the application catalog. It's a SQL database I have stood up, and I have some applications imported in here from various vendors. And the situation here is I've got some applications. These are basically managed because I'm working on them in my solution of choice to prepare these applications, but I want to compare that against the application list that I have that comes out of my environment. So if I go over the backlog, what I can do is I can import a CSV file. This could come from anything. It could come from your deployment solution, if you have an inventory solution, or it could be a list of the top 50 apps or whatever it may be. So it's just a CSV file. I can import that CSV file. It's got at least a product name, because I want a list of products. If I have a vendor or manufacturer, whatever you call it, that would be great too. If you want to supply a version for a specific version of that application, you can. And you can also apply what's called a priority, and that could be allows for further prioritization of these applications once they're in Admin Studio. But at the very least, I need a product name, so I've got that. So it reads the CSV file. It sees it's got 26 rows in this file. And so what it's going to do is it's going to compare it across a couple of different places. So if I hit finish here, the first couple columns, so this came directly from my CSV file. This is what I had in there. So I had applications like 1Password and 7-Zip, Adobe Acrobat, and Chrome, and some other ones. And priority, if I didn't have one, it just kind of gives it a 3 out of 5, and I can always update this if I want. But what I can do is I can compare this list, the CSV file, with two places. First is this version and catalog, meaning what do I have right now in my application catalog? So these would be what applications are currently managed because I have them in my software preparation solution like Admin Studio, and I'm actively preparing it. So I've got a version of Camtasia here. I've got Del Command Update. Got a little my cursor is acting up, but so I can match these up. So you can say from no match. So when I say Enterprise Reader from Foxit, I mean the Foxit Reader version 10 in this case that I have, and I can make those save those matches. So now, let's say this list came from my inventory source. I have Camtasia Studio out there. Well, Camtasia is an application that's in my catalog. I've prepared it in the past, so it's a managed application. But you can see I've got a lot of no matches, meaning I don't have this application in my catalog. So they're likely currently an unmanaged application. So I want to get it to a state where I can start to manage those. So like 7-Zip, for example, I don't have 7-Zip currently in my catalog, but it came from my inventory source because it was on my list. So I want to look to see if I can bring that in. So that's matching up here. And what we also have is we have a solution called a package feed. And this is kind of our catalog that Flexera is managing and updating and maintaining every day as new releases come out. And you can compare your list against not only what do you have locally inside your catalog, but also what does Flexera offer at the moment. And we can see there's a couple versions of 1Password available, so I can choose which one I want to go with. 7-Zip, in this case, there's different versions for the different architectures, 32 versus 64-bit, so I can choose which one. And I can go through the list here, a couple different versions supported by VMware, so we have a couple different versions to choose from. And you go through this matching exercise. You can see there's a newer version of Camtasia. They keep the last few versions around, but even the 2020 version, if that's what I want to stay on, is a newer. You can see the number here. So I can do that matchup and remember those settings. And if I have a subscription to the package feed, then not only can we do this matchup and see if Flexera offers it, but I can also then go ahead and download it, and then perform additional actions like testing the application for things like Windows compatibility and MSIX compatibility, Java dependencies, Log4j dependencies, and go through wrapping of applications and other preparation steps, and all the way even to, if I wanted to, hand off to my deployment system. So if I want to deploy this application automatically into Config Manager or SCCM or Intune or Workspace ONE, for example, we can do that. And so you can choose which actions you want to layer on top of it. But this matchup exercise is very important, so I can see which applications that I have under management, because I have something already in my catalog, and which ones that I don't have management today, but I could, if I have something like the package feed, I could quickly get it into an under management and then move forward with it. So having this process is certainly makes it a lot easier and faster than trying to do these things manually.
And then if you were to execute that, it would show up in the catalog, and then you'd have a match, and now it's under management. And you could optionally subscribe to it, so next time a new version appears, it can automatically do any of the configured automation as well. But all that aside, what we really wanted to show was, you can take an inventory and you compare it to what you have packages for. And even if you don't have Admin Studio, that'd be the exercise that you'd go through. But maybe it's a a spreadsheet or a more manual process. Cool, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
I'm gonna...
You'd ideally get this inventory from a system like Configuration Manager or something, and when you get it from a system like that, you'd also see the version column getting populated. So that will also give you a very good understanding as to how behind are you with respect to the version when you compare yourself against what's available in the package feed module, right? So package feed module always shows you the latest version that is available, and you could easily compare against, hey, I have 7.6, but looks like the latest one is 10.5, so you're way behind. So that's also a good assessment that you might want to consider if you want to keep up with the new versions of the applications.
Yep, and that data is available in the trial, or even if you're not licensed for package feed module. The purpose being that you could see just how does it match up against the applications you care about. So there's some value in that, assessing how you match against the package feed module, and then, as we showed right alongside that, assessing how the inventory imported matches to your actual catalog.
One thing to add also is, I think we might have mentioned it a little bit, but is the idea of kind of think of it as like semi-managed applications. Like we've got, what I hear a lot of times is where IT shops, especially the folks that they wear a lot of different hats, they got a lot of things going on. They don't necessarily have a large list of applications that they directly manage just because it's so much. So they lean on an application owner, somebody external from IT. If it's a finance application, somebody in accounting, is the owner, and they put the onus on them to say, it's your job to tell me when there's a new release and to stay up to date with it. And, that can work, if the app owner is diligent enough and subscribes to that and gets all their emails from the vendor. But some are better than others. And just the fact that a lot of those people, they have day jobs, right? They have other things. If I'm in accounting, my job first and foremost is to balance the books and make sure that we're in a sound financial position, not manage, when there's a new version of this application. But something like a patch catalog or package feed module would allow people, IT shops, to actually take on more than they used to, because it becomes an automated thing, and you don't have to rely on others to watch out for and look to see if there's new releases. So something else that we've heard from a lot of current customers and prospects.
Yeah, it's pretty common practice these days. So the slide is a giveaway here, but the next thing we're going to talk about is getting the applications that you don't manage out of your environment. So if you are not going to take that application under management, then that kind of by default tells us that you've decided you don't want that application in your environment, either because it's inappropriate, or it's unlicensed, or you have other applications you want customers to be using instead of that. Whatever the case, you pretty much need to make a decision to either get it under management, as we've been saying, or get it off. So the easiest way to go about finding how do I automatically get applications off my system is looking in the registry for the uninstall key. Many times though, so this uninstall string is actually what is launched when you interactively click the uninstall button in Add Remove Programs. And that frequently is not silent. So you're getting the information you need. Like in this case, it's a Windows installer package, so that's the GUID. So you want to remove that GUID, but you probably need to add the silent switch. And the same is the case for legacy applications that aren't identified as a GUID, but a name. Their uninstall string also may not be silent. Occasionally you'll see a silent uninstall string value, and that's probably what you're looking for when you can find it. But there isn't a lot of enforcement over what fields various applications take advantage of within the uninstall or the Add Remove Programs data. So I've done, oh man, another build slide. 12. Okay, so let me get them all up. All right. So the Add Remove Programs commands, these values that I showed in that screenshot are under that hive there. Like I said, usually it's a GUID these days, but it can be the name of an application. Particularly older applications will show up as a name and not a GUID. And then that's where you'll find the uninstall string. But you probably do need to make it silent. So I actually pulled this information from a script I wrote a long time ago that would try to look at that value and then make it silent. So if it's Windows Installer, you got the, sometimes it just runs the installer because it's interactive. Just running the installer again will prompt you, do you want to, repair the application or remove the application? You get that menu. So from an interactive perspective, that silent uninstall command may not even be a /x, it may be a /i. But you do have the GUID, and that's valuable. A couple others, if you look and see that the setup is Microsoft, a lot of the Microsoft legacy installers will support a /qn for a silent command line uninstall. If it's a WISE setup, then the uninstall string will contain unwise. That's the tool to run the uninstall. For that one, you can just add a /s, and it will do the uninstall silently. And Inno setup is another popular, older, free setup program that a lot of people used. In there, if you see uninst00, that kind of indicates to you that, okay, this is an Inno setup, and you can take that interactive silent or that interactive uninstall string and add silent and no restart as command line switches to convert it from an interactive uninstall to a silent one. So there's definitely tricks, and you could automate this to some degree, but there isn't a consistent, clean way to get any application off your system. There's things you can do from the command line with WMI, with PowerShell to say remove this application, but it's dependent on it being there in a supported way, and that pretty much excludes all legacy setups. So these tricks here can help you around some of that.
It's very common, right, Bob? We hear from our customers they spend many hours trying to just figure out these. And like you always say, and which I like the statement that every application is a puzzle, right? I really like that when I heard from you. So sometimes there are certain standards, like what if you are dealing with an MSI, it has got a standard set of command lines for installation, uninstallation. That's all great, but let's say you are dealing with an exe, then every application has got its own way of uninstalling. In many cases, it also depends on the authoring tool that was used for that setup file. In this case, we are talking about WISE, Inno setup, or let's say even install Shield. So in certain cases, these tools have a standard uninstallation string for uninstalling the application which are built using those authoring tools. So that could be one another way for you to figure out, hey, what could be the uninstallation string if in case it's not found in the registry. Or other way that I can look is or I can see is you can go back to repackaging. You could take a exe and always repackage it back to MSI, and of course it becomes very easy for you to uninstall. But again, when you consider the scenario here that we are talking about is unmanaged application, then you definitely may not have the setup file even to repackage to MSIs.
I think that is pretty much what we brought in terms of topics around managed applications. Hopefully there was a tip in there that made it a good one for you. But we are open to questions, and it need not be about managed applications. If you want to ask anything MSIX or Admin Studio or packaging process, any of the things we typically talk about are open, and willing to discuss anything packaging related.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe everyone's shy today. But
It's very unusual. Yeah. I hope that's not because this was a boring topic and we didn't do a good job. Everyone's asleep.
I think we did too good of a job.
A common question I receive when I'm talking to customers or potential customers is when they're evaluating Admin Studio's package feed module, they ask how it compares to a patch catalog. So maybe if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, we're really confident to stack our data up against anybody else's. We've got 2 to 3 times more than your average patch catalog. And of course, the real benefit being all the automation and the ability to convert that we also add, and the ability to wrap. I mean, people don't repackage a whole lot these days, but they do wrap. And so we can automatically download the new version, wrap it in PowerShell Deploy Toolkit, publish it. And that's not necessarily something you're going to get from any catalog. And then for all those applications that don't support a patch catalog, we have a lot of those too. So our patch catalog is like almost 2,000 applications that we have everything necessary to automate. But we have almost another 2,000 applications where the vendor doesn't provide the criteria for it to be included in the patch catalog. So none of our competitors will have it, but we do. We'll show you, hey, there's a new version and here's the download, but it doesn't have silent command line details. So it wouldn't be in a patch catalog, but it's perfect data to help you in Admin Studio to create your own custom package and so forth. So we're really putting a lot into the automation, out of the box automation of the product. And we're expanding on that even further in release coming out very soon. But the catalog itself is just much larger, and then the capabilities of the industry leading repackager coupled with 2 or 3 times the biggest patch catalog are really a perfect match. And now I see a lot of questions coming in. Any good ones to point out while I was talking there? I didn't read them.
There's a question. It goes like this: is there any way we can connect Admin Studio with Azure Portal? I would have liked it if there was a little more specifics added to this question. Could you please add more? But if your question is, do we want to support VMs on Azure or SQL Server on Azure, or even Intune? So Intune we already support, so you could take an application with an Admin Studio and publish to Intune, and Intune is on Azure, of course. And the other two that we are really looking to add support for in Admin Studio in the future releases is have the ability to create the catalogs on the Azure SQL Server and also leverage the VMs on Azure within the tool that is automatic application converter for your repackaging or conversion process. But if your question was different, please add more details and we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, and to kind of button that one up, we're not taking Admin Studio to the cloud, but we do want to be very cloud friendly, right? So you can run Admin Studio in a hosted VM, of course, but we also want to help you take advantage of your investment in cloud infrastructure like virtual machines and Azure SQL. I see a question.
There's
if you're
another question
changing from a typical MSI installer
Yes.
to deliver an MSIX, how would you automate the removal of the MSI prior to pushing the MSIX version? So that's a good question. So typically when you install an application, it will update the one in place, which is another kind of problem, right? So if you are wrapping the vendor setup and you deploy the vendor setup, then when a security update comes out, you can just wrap the new, secure version of the application's vendor setup and it will 99% of the time intelligently install over the top of the one there and keep your initial setting configurations and everything nice and sweet. If you're repackaging, then you pretty much have to remove the old application and install the new application, because the component GUIDs for everything in there, the ref counts aren't going to be right. It's not going to have the logic unless you go through the very ugly process of matching all your component IDs within the Windows installer repackaged version. Then it's just not going to be able to handle it gracefully. So very commonly it'll be remove the old one, install the new, and certainly switching technologies to MSIX, you'll be in the same boat, because if you deploy that MSIX version, it should sit right alongside the one that's already there and run properly, because it's in its own container. So unless you want two copies of the application, then your step one would be remove the old application. That can be part of your deployment script. It could also be potentially part of a PowerShell fix-up that you can put in your MSIX package to look for previous versions and run the silent uninstall. Anything to add to that, Karen?
I think it makes it a lot easier if you're having a deployment systems like Configuration Manager or any others for automatic removal. You could create uninstalled programs for the applications and just deploy the uninstalled programs. So you could identify a bunch of machines, generally referred as collections. So you could just deploy the uninstallation program to a collection, and then it would identify all those machines which have this older MSI and then just uninstall them. So that could be a easier way in case you already have a deployment system in your environment today.
All right. Another way I could see it is you could make it a dependency of the application, right? So when you're going to deploy out the MSIX version, you have a uninstall script of some kind that's a prerequisite. It gets deployed, it checks for it, and if it's not there, then you're good. Don't have to do anything. But if it is there, let's uninstall that first, and then it deploys the MSIX version. So it depends on what your deployment system supports, but you could make it a prerequisite within that system as well. So a lot of different ways to build a boat, as it were. So in this case, a lot of different ways you could handle it. I guess it depends on how you're deploying the application, and to Bob's point, do you want it to run side by side? Because it could. And if not, how do you want to handle it? Do you want to handle it at runtime of the MSIX package? Do you want to perform the cleanup externally, through your deployment system? Different ways you could do it depending on what the deployment system, like I said, and the experience you want.
But it will pretty much be.
Since we're talking.
I would say it's pretty much going to be a given that even if the last installer you ran was a installer from the vendor, the MSI, and then you get an MSIX from that vendor, that MSIX also is probably not going to be able to support doing anything with the previous version. So there'll be that manual uninstall. The fix-up to run a PowerShell script, where you could run a script before and after an application in MSIX runs, that's perfect for us as enterprise users to look for and automatically remove previous versions. But the ISVs don't have that option. They're not allowed to use fix-ups. They're not allowed to ship a PowerShell script with their vendor MSIX.
There's an interesting point here that I thought I'll share, because we're talking about MSI and MSIX to be present alongside each other on a machine. Now, let's say you already have an MSI on your machine and you have done some, penning a shortcut on your taskbar or a couple of other customizations. Then what you could do is you could use an extension that is called as it's been a while, but I think it's called desktop.migration. It's an extension that you could use in MSIX, and when you deploy that MSIX, then it would retain all those customizations that you had on MSI. Now, when you uninstall MSI later, you would still see that icon pinned to the taskbar that you had actually done on MSI. So that's a cool thing if somebody wants to try it out, and maybe you could let us know how did it go.
Looks like there's another question regarding package feed module. Is there an option to in-place upgrade the previously created application, or does it create a new application whenever a new version is released? So I think that's if you're subscribed to the application, you have version 2, version 3 comes out. Does version 2 still exist in the catalog?
Yeah, so when you download new version, yeah, it's retained because you may want to retain it. You may want to keep both around. You may want, some customers we talk to want to keep, N and N-1 around because they don't necessarily want to just upgrade everything and replace it. But so you kind of have them both for a period of time. They would both remain in the catalog if you choose to publish the newer version. How Admin Studio connects to the deployment system, it'll create a new application for that, or new app, whatever it's called in that system. And then you can choose to supersede the old version, or you can remove the old version, but it would create a new application, so you could do that kind of side-by-side and migration over time.
Looks like Tim asked, has there been any vendors that released or delivered MSI packages lately? I think I asked that same question to you, Bob, in our last internal meeting.
Yeah, and it's still pretty quiet, right? We've got, so I think, was it Firefox that
Yeah,
Firefox. So that's the first kind of real MSIX package, and that I consider. There are a couple from Microsoft, like toolkits and more admin focused solutions, and also a couple of other tools. And then there are even more MSIX packages kind of hidden in the Microsoft Store. You can't go and download the MSIX and treat it like one that's managed by the store. So it kind of ruins it from our IT pro perspective. So far, the only serious vendor application that I've seen is that Firefox package. Hopefully the first of many to come. And then I see a question about configuring Admin Studio for Intune. I don't think we'll get into that here, but we'll reach out to you. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty well documented, and Mike and his team are working on a lot of short videos to help illustrate different features like that you can look forward to soon as well.
Yeah,
we can
the one point I'll put there, the quick point there is, not only there is a side on the Admin Studio side to configure it to talk to Intune, but you have to go into Intune itself and enable API access. Since it is a cloud solution, you have to enable that you want your tenant to have API access to an external application. But to Bob's point, we do have that in the documentation, how you would configure that. So you set that up on the Intune side, set up the connection like you would with other deployment systems on the Admin Studio side, then Admin Studio can talk to Intune and perform its operations that way. But yeah, check the documentation.
Or hit us up on community, where we've got
That's right.
lots of videos, articles. There is a discussion forum there as well. Happy to answer questions, not just those that are product related, but technology related as well. So please join us there and take advantage of that. Our next one of these will be in August. Hopefully when you signed up, you check that box to be notified of future ones, so you don't have to come look for it each time, but we will be trying to start promoting it on places like LinkedIn a week or two ahead of each date. And for the foreseeable future, we're planning to continue doing this every other month. And I'll thank you for your time and give you a few minutes back. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.